Hi, this is Garland of Books, and I had some books I wanted to share with you today that were some of my most favorite books that I read in 2021. So yeah, let's get started. The one that I started off the year with was this copy of Pride and Prejudice. It is illustrated by Hugh Thompson, and that was really fun for me. I have read Pride and Prejudice more than 10 times, I'd say, and so it's one of my favorite books, since I was a teenager. But the illustrations really added a bit, so I wanted to share some of them with you. Okay, so some of these funniest ones here are when Mr. Collins, who is their cousin, who is the estate of the Bennets is entailed away to Mr. Collins. So, and they have no sons, so yeah, it goes to him. And so when he comes, he's looking for a wife, and his eyes fall on Jane, who is their beauty, and Mrs. Bennet, the mother, she always has a keen eye for matches, but she thinks that Jane and Bingley are very soon to be married, so she redirects his attention to Elizabeth II, and it just has this funny picture here where it's like a horse show or something, and this sign above Jane that says "Not for sale," such that when he makes his offer to her, he says, almost from the very first moment that I came into the house, that she caught his eye. And yeah, so I just thought that picture was hilarious. Okay, here's another one. After Collins has proposed to Elizabeth and she has rejected him, his feelings are all hurt, and he goes to their neighbors, the Lucases, for a few days, and he proposes to Charlotte Lucas, Elizabeth's best friend, and she accepts his hand. But anyways, there's this picture of Collins, and he's holding on to Charlotte Lucas's hand, and the caption is "So much love and eloquence," and yeah, that one just cracks you up in the whole setting of how he is, who his character is. And then, okay, here was another good illustration I found. So this is when Darcy has proposed to Elizabeth for the first time, and she has flat out rejected him. But then she accuses him on 2 different counts, and he writes a letter in his defense. So she has gotten the letter regarding Wickham and Jane, and I guess she is weighing between who to trust, Darcy or Wickham, who is the truth teller in this situation. So it has her here with her scales, and I'm guessing the sword, it reminds me of Lady Justice, the statue in front of the Supreme Court, and it's depicted other places, but that's such a cool depiction of the scales and the sword. So anyways, I would highly recommend the illustrated version with Hugh Thompson. He lived in the same time as Jane Austen. He did write this, years later, but it's much more contemporary to her time than a modern illustrator would be. So yes, very much recommend this. Okay. And the next one I have here is Heidi by Johanna Spyri. So this was one of the most famous Swiss stories. It's originally written in Dutch, and this translation, it's translated by Helen B. Dole, and that makes a lot of difference because this is a beautifully written, beloved, redemptive story, and some of the translations, I think Helen Dole was actually the second person to translate it. The first one, I think, had such a dull, just choppy sentences, just missed the beautiful eloquence of the story and lost the charm and the flow of it. So it really makes a difference what translation you get. So I would highly recommend finding a Helen Dole translation. I have 2 books that are translated by Helen Dole. This one I got first because I had read about it ahead of time, so I wanted, whenever it's a translated work, I tried to see like what translation do I want, or what options are there. And then I was able to buy a second one and compare it to this one because they don't always say who the translator is. So I'm going to give you some of the beginning pages so that if you're looking for this translation, you'll be able to find it. So here's the If y'all wanted to screenshot some of the words, there's some of the picture too. Let me just show you the first couple pages. But yeah. And yeah, it's just beautiful. I'll read a little bit of the opening to kind of set the scene. This is chapter 1, The Alm Uncle. From the pleasantly situated old town of Meienfeld, a footpath leads up through shady green meadows to the foot of the mountains, which, as they gaze down on the valley, present a solemn and majestic picture. Anyone who follows it will soon catch the keen fragrance of grassy pasture lands, for the footpath goes up straight and steep to the Alps. One bright sunny June morning, a tall, sturdy-looking girl, evidently a native of the mountains, was climbing this narrow path. She led by the hand a little maiden, whose cheeks glowed as if a ruddy flame were under her dark brown skin. And what wonder, in spite of the hot June sun, the child was bundled up as if for protection against the sharpest cold. She could not have been 5 years old, but it was impossible to tell anything about her natural figure, for she wore 2 or 3 dresses, one over the other, and a big red cotton scarf round her neck. Her feet were lost in heavy hobnailed shoes, and the little thing was quite formless as she made her hot and laborious way up the mountain. At the end of an hour of steady climbing, the 2 girls came to the group of houses that lies halfway up the Alm Mountain and is called Dorfli, or the little village. Here they were greeted from almost every cottage and by everyone in the street, for the older of the 2 girls had reached her home. Nevertheless, she made no pause but hurried on, answering all questions and greetings as she went. At the very end of the hamlet, as she passed the last of the scattered cottages, a voice from the doorway cried, "Wait a moment, Dete, I'll go with you if you are bound up the mountain." So anyways, that's the opening. So Heidi's being taken up there with all these dresses because her, I think it's her Aunt Dete, has gotten a job in the city, and so she's an orphan. Heidi is an orphan, and so her aunt's trying to leave her with the Alm Uncle, which is Heidi's grandfather, whom she's never met, so that she can go to her job in the city. And the Alm Uncle, or the grandfather, he lives way up high in the Alps. So there's this town, and then he lives even further up, kind of, out in the country, but really it's up in the top of the mountain, which is beautiful in the summertime, but it gets very harsh in the wintertime, very, very cold, very harsh living. And so this grumpy grandfather who's chosen to live all by himself out there, she comes and basically doesn't take no for an answer, and she drops Heidi off and leaves her there, and then she goes and leaves and goes out of town. And the grandfather doesn't really consent to having her, but this is just, Heidi is such a character that she melts the heart of everyone whose life she comes into. So there's many characters who are melted by her sweet nature. There's one character particularly who does not like her at all. I do find the characters pretty realistic because there's just a range of way people act, and so it's very interesting. But I was going to read one part in here. This is, she lives with her grandfather for a while, and then her aunt finds a position for her, which is, I think it's kind of like a job that the aunt gets paid for placing her, and she doesn't herself get paid. But she thinks maybe it'll be beneficial to her, so she's sent away from the grandfather, at that point, also against his will, because he loves her and wants to keep her there, but can't really stop the aunt from taking her. She's placed in this house of a wealthy, there's a wealthy man. The mother has passed away, and there's a girl who is, I think, about 10. She's a little older than Heidi. Heidi at this point might be 7, about 7 or 8, I think. And the girl she has like private tutor who comes to teach, and she herself is confined to a wheelchair. I think she was sick after her mother passed away, and then she's just been weak. So it's not clear really if she's permanently handicapped or if she's just kind of sick and weak. But Heidi loves the girl, but she misses the Alm Uncle, her grandfather, and she misses the country because she's in the city and there's no no mountains, no green really to be seen. Okay. And then the girl that she's staying with, her grandmother comes to visit, and this is Heidi meeting with her after the housemaid was complaining about her, or the head house lady. That is just the trouble, it is indeed, exclaimed Fräulein Rottenmeier, wringing her hands. What can the child do with books? In all this time, she has not even learned her ABCs. It is really impossible to get a single idea into this creature's head. The Herr Candidate can tell you all about that. If this excellent man didn't possess the patience of an angel from heaven, he would long ago have given up trying to teach her. This is very strange. She doesn't look like a child who cannot learn the alphabet, said Frau Sessemann, that's the grandmother. Now bring her to me. She can first look at the pictures in the books. Fräulein Rottenmeier was anxious to make further remarks, but Frau Sessemann had already turned around and was hurrying back to her own room. She was very much surprised to hear of Heidi's stupidity and thought she would make an investigation, but not with the Herr Candidate. Though she really valued him on account of his good character, she always spoke to him in a particularly friendly way whenever she met him, but then hurried away in order not to be drawn into conversation with him, for his manner of expressing himself was rather annoying to her. Heidi came into the grandmamma's room and opened her eyes wide when she saw the gay pictures in the large books which the lady had brought with her. Suddenly, Heidi screamed aloud when the grandmamma turned a new leaf. She looked at the figures with gleaming eyes. Then all at once, bright tears rushed to them, and she began to sob as if her heart would break. The grandmamma examined the picture. It was a lovely green pasture where all sorts of animals were feeding and nibbling the green shrubs. In the middle stood the shepherd, leaning on a long staff and gazing at the happy creatures. It seemed as if there were a golden light over it all, for the sun was just going down beyond the horizon. The grandmamma took Heidi by the hand. Come, come, child, she said in a friendly way. Don't cry, don't cry. The picture made you remember something. But see, there is a lovely story about it, which I will tell you this evening. And there are a great many more beautiful stories in this book, which can be read and repeated. Come, we must have a little talk together. Dry your tears, and now stand right here in front of me so that I can look straight at you. There, that's right, now we are happy again. But it was still some time before Heidi could stop sobbing. The grandmamma gave her a good while to recover, merely saying encouragingly now and then, There, that's good, now we are happy again together. When she finally saw that the child was quieted, she said, Now you must tell me something, my child. How do you get along in the study hours with the Herr Candidate? Are you studying well, and have you learned something? Oh no, answered Heidi, sighing. But I knew that it couldn't be learned. What could not be learned, Heidi? What do you mean? People can't learn to read, it is too hard. What an idea, and where did you hear this news? Peter told me so, and he knows about it. He has to keep trying, but he can never learn, it is too hard. Well, Peter is a strange fellow, but see here, Heidi, you must not always take for granted what Peter tells you. You must try for yourself. Surely you have not listened with all your mind to the Herr Candidate and looked at the letters. It's of no use, asserted Heidi, with a tone of entirely giving in to what could not be helped. Heidi, said the grandmamma, now I am going to tell you something. You have not learned to read yet because you believed Peter. But now you must believe me, and I tell you really and truly that you can learn to read in a short time, like a great many children who are like you and not like Peter. And now you must know what will happen when you can read. You have seen the shepherd in the beautiful green pasture. As soon as you can read, you shall have the book for your own, so that you can learn his whole story, just as if someone told it to you, all that he is doing with his sheep and goats, and all the remarkable things that happened to him. You would like to know this, wouldn't you, Heidi? Heidi had listened with the most eager attention, and now she said, with beaming eyes and drawing a deep breath, Oh, if only I could read now. It will come, and it won't take long. That I can see already, Heidi. And now we must look after Clara. Come, we will take the lovely books with us. And the grandmamma took Heidi by the hand and went with her into the library. So that's just a snippet of this beautiful book. I would highly recommend it, especially if you haven't ever read it before. This is one that I felt like almost deprived. Like, why didn't I get to read this when I was a little girl? This belonged to me even back then. So this has been one of the joys of my life to read this book, and I This year I read it to myself, but in a few more years I'll be able to read it to my children, and they're not quite old enough for it yet, but I'm so excited about it. It's just so beautiful. Yes, a truly, truly living book, and very redemptive, and yes, 5 stars, a million stars. Okay, this next one, this is Ben-Hur by Lew Wallace, and this is now one of my most favorite books. This is a treasure. This was certainly the longest book I read this year. I think this version is over 800 pages. It was very good. It's also, the subtitle of it is, so some kind is called Ben-Hur, A Tale of the Christ. So this is, the main character in this one is a fictional character called Judah Ben-Hur, but it is set in the time of the Christ, like in the time of the wise men. Judah Ben-Hur himself is probably about the same age as Jesus. Now, Jesus is not a main character in the book, but it's kind of like different parts of Judah's life. He sees him briefly. I think he sees him very briefly when he's young, and it's just like a kindness that's done to him. There's no words exchanged, just something kind that Jesus did for him in a time when he needed it, and just offering him a drink of water. And and then I think he hears him when he's giving his like Sermon on the Mount, or some sermons where people are listening. And then the climax of this book, I didn't plan it this way, but it's kind of a blessing. I was reading it, and it was almost Easter time. So like on Good Friday, like the couple days leading up to Easter, I was reading like the last 150 pages because I was so into it, and it was such a good time to read it. And it was, very good. Let's see. First, I was going to show some of the pictures. This is an illustrated Ben-Hur. The whole first part of the book is actually about the wise men, and they're kind of talking about the different, some of their background, and then leading up to seeing Mary and the baby. And so there were 2 pictures. Okay, so here, this was Mary and the baby, and I loved all that vine work around it. All of the ones in this picture, they're like this. They're just like pen and ink, just black and white pictures, and sometimes they're just small around the edges. And then towards the very end of the book is when it includes parts of the crucifixion. But I noticed right away that beautiful vines of ivy, and showing his mother there at the crucifixion as well. I just thought those were very memorable, very beautiful. And then, so yes, this is the story of a Jewish man who is basically there's a very unfortunate event, and the Romans, I guess, cast blame. It's not exactly framing. His sister leans on part of their roofing, and one of the roofing tiles falls and hits someone, and it looks like he died, and he didn't actually die, but they think that it was done maliciously and punished the whole family without trial, and punished them. If you read The Count of Monte Cristo, it's kind of like that. It's because they don't have the evidence on their side that it was malicious or purposeful. They punish them in a way that can't be undone. They give them sort of secret punishments so that they can't be pardoned because there's not much evidence of what's happened. So his life is drastically changed in one day. And he's sentenced to life on the galleys as a rower, a galley slave, and that is generally thought to be a 1-year death sentence because it's so vicious on the Roman ships. And it goes through, and he had kind of a vision for his life, and that fades away, and then later it's kind of remade, and then the way that the story of Jesus and the crucifixion are woven into it everything, it's like all of his hopes and dreams are disappointed and change and renew, and it's just very, very fascinating story. I wanted to read a little part from, I say a little part, this is a part when his childhood friend, who was a Roman, so it's a friend from his boyhood, has been away in Rome for 5 years, and then he comes back, and he is, what he says is down Eros, up Mars, so down with love and up with war, and he, looks down on and ridicules Ben-Hur. Ben-Hur is a few years his junior, and it just, crushes that childhood friendship they had, and it makes him question himself. He's a boy of 17 years old, Ben-Hur, and he's quickly becoming a man. So I think this is the day before everything changes, and he's come to his mother. His father has passed away, and he's come to his mother to ask things as he's pondering what his future will be. "The Masala," she said, what could he say to so trouble you? He is very much changed. You mean he has come back a Roman? Yes. Roman, she continued half to herself. To all the world, the word means master. How long has he been away? 5 years. She raised her head and looked off into the night. The heirs of the Via Sacra are well enough in the streets of the Egyptian and in Babylon, but in Jerusalem, our Jerusalem, the covenant abides. And full of the thought, she settled back into her easy place. He was first to speak. What Masala said, my mother, was sharp enough in itself, but taken with the manner, some of the sayings were intolerable. I think I understand you. Rome, her poets, orators, senators, courtiers, are mad with affectation of what they call satire. I suppose all great peoples are proud, he went on, scarcely noticing the interruption, but the pride of that people is unlike all others. In these latter days it is so grown the gods barely escape it. The gods escape, said the mother quickly. More than one Roman has accepted worship as his divine right. Well, Masala always had his share of the disagreeable quality. When he was a child, I have seen him mock strangers whom even Herod condescended to receive with honors. Yet he always spared Judea. For the first time in conversation with me today, he trifled with our customs and God. As you would have had me to do, I parted with him finally. And now, O my dear mother, I would know with more certainty if there be just ground for the Romans' contempt. In what am I his inferior? Is ours a lower order of people? Why should I, even in Caesar's presence, feel the shrinking of a slave? Tell me especially why, if I have the soul and so choose, I may not hunt the honors of the world in all its fields. Why may not I take sword and indulge the passion of war? As a poet, why may not I sing of all themes? I can be a worker in metals, a keeper of flocks, a merchant. Why not an artist like the Greek? Tell me, O my mother, and this is the sum of my trouble. Why may not a son of Israel do all a Roman may? So there was his question, and then they talk a little bit more. Let me see where I can get to the place where she summons up her full answer, I think. Okay, she set about the task, her native power reinforced by love, to such degree that her speech took a masculine strength and at times a poet's fervor. There never has been a people, she began, who did not think themselves at least equal to any other. Never a great nation, my son, that did not believe itself the very superior. When the Roman looks down upon Israel and laughs, he merely repeats the folly of the Egyptian, the Assyrian, and the Macedonian. And as the laugh is against God, the result will be the same. Her voice became firmer. There is no law by which to determine the superiority of nations, hence the vanity of the claim and the idleness of disputes about it. A people risen, run their race and die either of themselves or at the hands of another, who, succeeding to their power, take possession of their place, and upon their monuments write new names. Such is history. If I were called upon to symbolize God and man in the simplest form, I would draw a straight line and a circle, and of the line I would say, this is God, for he alone moves forward, forever straight forward, and of the circle, this is man, such is his progress. I do not mean that there is no difference between the careers of nations. No two are alike. The difference, however, is not, as some say, in the extent of the circle they describe or the space of earth they cover, but in the sphere of their movement, the highest being nearest God. To stop here, my son, would be to leave the subject where we began. Let us go on. There are signs by which to measure the height of the circle each nation runs while in its course. By them let us compare the Hebrew and the Roman. The simplest of all the signs is the daily life of the people. Of this I will only say, Israel has at times forgotten God, while the Roman never knew him. Consequently, comparison is not possible. Your friend, or your former friend, charged, if I understand you rightly, that we have had no poets, artists, or warriors, by which he meant, I suppose, to deny that we have had great men. The next most certain of the signs. A just consideration of this charge requires a definition at the commencement. A great man, O my boy, is one whose life proves him to have been recognized, if not called, by God. A Persian was used to punish our recreant fathers, and he carried them into captivity. Another Persian was selected to restore their children to the Holy Land. Greater than either of them, however, was the Macedonian, through whom the desolation of Judea and the temple was avenged. The special distinction of the men was that they were chosen by the Lord, each for a divine purpose, and that they were Gentiles does not lessen their glory. Do not lose sight of this definition while I proceed. There is an idea that war is the most noble occupation of men, and that the most exalted greatness is the growth of battlefields. Because the world has adopted the idea, be not you deceived. That we must worship something is a law which will continue as long as there is anything we cannot understand. The prayer of the barbarian is a wail of fear addressed to strength, the only divine quality he can clearly conceive, hence his faith in heroes. What is Jove but a Roman hero? The Greeks have their great glory because they were the first to set mind above strength. In Athens, the orator and philosopher were more revered than the warrior. The charioteer and the swiftest runner are still idols of the arena, yet the immortelles are reserved for the sweetest singer. The birthplace of one poet was contested by 7 cities, but was the Hellene the first to deny the old barbaric faith? No, my son, that glory is ours. Against brutalism our fathers erected God. In our worship, the wail of fear gave place to the Hosanna and the Psalm. So the Hebrew and the Greek would have carried all humanity forward and upward. But alas, the government of the world presumes war as an eternal condition. Wherefore, over mind and above God, the Roman has enthroned his Caesar, the absorbent of all obtainable power and prohibition of any other greatness. The sway of the Greek was a flowering time for genius. In return for the liberty it then enjoyed, what a company of thinkers the mind led forth. There was a glory for every excellence and a perfection so absolute that in everything but war, even the Roman has stooped to imitation. A Greek is now the model of the orators in the forum. Listen, and in every Roman song you will hear the rhythm of the Greek. If a Roman opens his mouth speaking wisely of moralities or abstractions, or of the mysteries of nature, he is either a plagiarist or the disciple of some school which had a Greek for its founder. In nothing but war, I say again, has Rome a claim to originality. Her games and spectacles are Greek inventions dashed with blood to gratify the ferocity of her rabble. Her religion, if such it may be called, is made up of contributions from the faiths of all other peoples. Her most venerated gods are from Olympus, even her Mars, and for that matter the Jove she much magnifies. So it happens, O my son, that of the whole world our Israel alone can dispute the superiority of the Greek, and with him contest the palm of original genius. Anyways, she goes on for a while, and it's really a beautiful conversation. I dwelled on this part of the book. This was one of my most favorite parts of the whole book. This conversation before his life was turned upside down and changed forever, one of those boy to man instantly situations. But yes, this book was deeply beautiful. I certainly look forward to reading this again one day. Something to cherish, and yes, I loved it. It was very good. I think in many ways it could be considered like the Count of Monte Cristo. It's a similar kind of tale in a way, but even more beautiful, I think. although I do love The Count of Monte Cristo. So yes, highly recommend Ben-Hur by Lew Wallace. I forgot to say that. Lewis Wallace or Lew Wallace. All right. All right, and then this next one that I read. Hey, so this video got long because I was reading my favorite quotes from all my books, so I am saving some of it for next time, so please join me again for part 2 of this video.